Welcome to Week 14 DFS preview. We had some exciting football last week, of which I'll admit I made a wrong call on one or two of the games, but it was a lot of fun to see. That Cincinnati Pittsburgh game ended up being a lot more of a score fest than I expected.
So let's review what hit on that Thanksgiving game because it's super interesting what won the Millionaire Maker on DraftKings. There was a giant tie. The first 85 people tied, and instead of winning $1 million, look, they got 15,000. Still not a bad day, but when you're seeing that you're on top and you're only getting 15,000 instead of a million, it's a little bit of a letdown, I'm sure. Why'd this happen? Well, yes, they picked all the top players, but it's because all the chalk hit on Thanksgiving night. You can see these draft percentages, so the percentages owned, which we talk so much about, and the lowest owned player was Tua, almost 17%. Everyone else was well over 30. Jaden Reed even was 28. So because of that, there were a lot of people that had this lineup. This is something that we kind of avoid when we're building these lineups because we are looking to get different and not those obvious picks. If you want to play the obvious picks and assume they'll hit, they don't very often, but on a 3 game slate, they're a little bit more likely to do it.
It was weird. It's kind of the only call that you had to make was fade the lines, and then you were probably going to wind up with some sort of lineup that looks similar to that and do pretty well. So if you faded the
Yeah.
lines and didn't include either of the running backs, you probably had a great day, and hopefully you won some money on Thanksgiving. I can't say I was part of that. I was trying to get too different, but hopefully you were on that camp and won some money last week.
Well, let's move on to Week 14, and as we jump into this, we have a free Fangirl football contest on DraftKings running this week. It's limited to 50 entries, so go ahead and click on that link in the description and reserve your spot and join us this weekend in our free Fangirl football contest where you could win a prize pack. Let's
All right.
jump
So
into
week
the
14, I think we should just start with the Saquon Barkley call, and he's $9,000. Are the Eagles going to let him go after that record, that single season record, which is 2,105 rushing yards in a single season? He could rack up 300 yards in this game. He could rack up 300 yards by halftime.
He could. It worries me a little bit too much if they get too far ahead. This team is looking at the playoffs. They're feeling good. What will they be doing as far as running back workload in the second half if they get up huge? So that kind of worries me. But really, this slate is kind of dominated by the running back decisions. We kind of have the free square decision we have to make with Isaac Garindo with the CMC and Mason injuries. So we do get him available at 5,000 on DraftKings, and he's even cheaper on FanDuel for some reason. So it makes him hard to turn down on FanDuel. But I think it all starts with the running backs this week, kind of the trend of the season.
It is. And I have a lot more running backs I like than Garendo.
Would you
So
go
let's
for
go through the
both?
games.
Would you go for Barkley and Garindo?
I think
I don't want to get.
Garindo is one of the options that can free up some of the higher end plays like Saquon. So we'll kind of dive into it, but I think he might free up some cash.
Well, let's kick it off with Buffalo at the Rams. Buffalo's favored by 5. Over under is 49.5. We got some injuries. Coleman and Kincaid are still not practicing. Both were limited at Wednesday's walkthrough. What do y'all think here?
So I'm kind of initial impression, I'm leaning the under. I feel like this game, it's in LA, and LA's been very pass happy ever since I got Puka Nakua back. But Buffalo's just been getting healthier. Their secondary's been looking stronger, and I really don't think LA's going to be able to move the ball too well in this matchup. So I'm kind of looking for maybe some supplemental pieces, but I'm not building my team around this game. What about you?
I'm not building my team around this game, but I do feel like they both should be able to run. I don't know that I'm on the under, but I feel like the running matchups on paper are good for both teams. I like it better, obviously, on the Bills side. James Cook, I don't mind playing James Cook or Ray Davis in both of these. They're clearly sharing, but they both had touchdowns last week. I don't necessarily like that split going on the Ram side with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. That one's starting to worry me a little bit, mostly because Kyron Williams hasn't been running the ball well. He gets it a lot, but he hasn't been running it well. So I feel like they're bringing in Karam to see if he can be a more explosive back. But I think they're going to think they have to come out throwing in this game. I don't know how well that's going to go.
They probably will to keep pace. I think my one thing that scares me with the Cook and Davis is first they're splitting, and you also have Allen that can be stealing some rushing yards and rushing touchdowns in the red zone as well. I think, like we were kind of hinting at earlier, there is a lot of running back plays on this, and I'm not really going to be looking that way. The main pieces I was looking at were maybe a Shakir or a really cheap play in Mac Hollins. He's down at 3,500, so he kind of can free up some space later on too.
He can. He is highly dependent on Keon Coleman being out, I feel like.
Yes.
And Amari Cooper. So both injured. There's like just a little bit too unknown here, and I'm a little hesitant to go on the under on this side. So let's move on to another game that we might like better.
Yeah, let's chat Vegas at Tampa Bay, where Tampa Bay is favored by 6.5, and the over-under is 46.5. We have Bucky Irving and Mike Evans, who have been on the injury report. Irving practiced on Thursday. Evans did not practice. Couple of injuries there. We also saw Baker get stepped on, but he never showed up on the injury report, so they're getting a little banged up over there. What do y'all like about this game?
This is one of my favorite games. So I liked what we saw out of Vegas last week with AOC. He's looking very strong, but I even love it more because it's dominated by Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers for the Raiders. They just take control of this game. We don't really have to worry about are they going to get their targets, because they're going to get their targets, and we know that the Bucs are going to give up points. And then I also, you can't not like Bucky Irving or Rashad White, other than Bucky Irving's banged up.
I will
can
say
also,
for-
so I
Go ahead.
my low cost player is Sincere McCormick on the Raiders at 4,600 to save some money. I like him at running back, assuming that Madison.
yeah,
Assuming
Madison and Abdullah.
Yeah, assuming that Madison and Abdullah and the other one are all out. Put
Yeah,
it in-
Zamir White. For the Bucks, I think the injuries will probably play a big role. I mean, we saw Bucky Irving limping off the field at the end of that overtime game last week. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he misses. And I think it really does change the way I think about this game based on his status. Tampa Bay has been a lot more comfortable running the ball with kind of the emergence of this rookie running back. But if he's to miss, I think it kind of opens up some other plays. Maybe they go back to Kate Auden and he starts seeing more of the targets share he saw earlier in the year and start letting Baker throw it a little bit more. But I wouldn't be surprised if Bucky's to miss, they let Tampa Bay kind of open it up passing again.
Yeah, they definitely could. You could talk me into Sean Tucker if Bucky Irving's going to be out. I think he comes right back in. We've seen him have a big game before, so he can definitely fill in pretty well for Bucky Irving if needed. So I like this game on both sides of it. I don't feel like either one has too much of a defense.
Yeah, you do have
Yeah.
to pay up for Bowers, but I mean, he's having a historic season, and I don't think he's as expensive as he should be.
No, I feel like the most difficult thing in this game is deciding between Bowers and Otten.
Mhm.
Would you build a stack with AOC?
I could do it.
None of the quarterback plays immediately, like the higher end options, are really just Allen and Hurts. And I don't see too many ways that they get there and dominate, and you have to have one of those top end quarterbacks. So I think you can kind of get away with kind of a middle tier. And if AOC gets 2 passing touchdowns, then he did his job, and you probably spent your money wisely at elite running
Yeah.
backs.
I
Well,
don't see how he leaves this game without 2 passing touchdowns.
Yep, and I'll also say Tampa Bay defense has allowed the 3rd most passing yards with the 4th lowest interception rate. So does lead this to be a good potential game for AOC at a low cost. But let's continue on to Carolina at Philadelphia, where Philadelphia is favored by 12.5 and the over-under is 46. We were talking about Barkley already. So are you benching or are you grabbing him? And are you picking up anyone from Carolina?
So personally, I'm not looking to pick up anyone from Carolina. They have looked good the past couple weeks, but Tampa Bay's defense, we were just talking about how bad they were. I think that really helped them look good last week. And this Eagles defense has kind of put it all together, and they've just been dominant, shutting everyone down. So if I want to go big on this game, I'm probably just doing full Philadelphia stacks and not getting any piece on the Carolina side.
I can't say that I love Carolina. I could definitely take a piece with Adam Thielen at 5,300. I feel like he's going to get enough targets and action that he can pay off that price. He could rack up 20 points easy in this game. They're going to be behind. They're going to be throwing the ball.
I don't really see a way that Philadelphia is not getting to at least 30 points, probably 35. And so really, if we're going to plan on that many touchdowns, then there's going to be pieces that come out of here. The biggest decision for which pieces to take from the Eagles side really is going to come down to roster percentage for me. If later on the week I see Barkley's the play and everyone's loving to go to Barkley, then I'm going to have some lineups with Hurts and A.J. Brown and just saying that Barkley goes down at the 1, we get a couple tush pushes. And even though Barkley has all the yards, he doesn't get there because of his price.
I'm a little worried about A.J. Brown with the return of Devonta Smith. That's one injury situation that I'd like to monitor a little bit more. We're not certain that Devonta Smith is going to make it back from that hamstring injury, but he is practicing. They could just assume we don't need you this week and give you another week off to make that playoff push and be more involved in those more difficult games. So maybe they hold him out. If they hold him out, then A.J. Brown looks better. But with Devonta Smith in there, it becomes a little murkier for me.
Yeah, I saw Devontae Smith was a limited participant in practice, so I think he probably will be suiting up in this game.
Yeah. I don't think he will, but we can go
Is
on.
it still called a stack if you don't pick up anyone from the other side of the game?
It is.
Yes. You can have some skinny stacks where you just have that one wide receiver. And I mean, we saw that a couple weeks ago with the Lions. When the Lions played Jacksonville, you didn't need a Jacksonville player on the other side. They only scored like 6 points. So you can have those complete just Eagles kill the Panthers, and you need a couple of Eagles players.
Well, let's move on to Atlanta at Minnesota, where Minnesota's favored by 6. Over-under is 45.5. This is a controversial one for the three of us. I know we have some very different opinions on if this game is going to be more on the overside or underside.
Yeah, I'm just out on this game. I don't want any part of this game. No. Justin Jefferson costs too much.
I think this one's fun. So I don't see a way that Kirk Cousins is average in this game. I think he's either going to be terrible, like we've seen the past couple of weeks, or he's going back home. He's going back to Minnesota. He's able to read the blitzes, that Minnesota's the most blitz-happy team in the league. And he's able to read it, get those hot routes, and has a great game. So
he hasn't thrown for a touchdown since week 9. So yeah. We're on the same page.
It's been bad. It's been bad. They had to announce that he was the starter for the rookie quarterbacks. You know it's been bad, but like I was saying, it's probably 60, 70% of the time he's terrible in this game. But there's a chance.
That lottery ticket?
Yes. And I think if he does come through, the receiving options are great. London and Mooney have been seeing so many targets that if he does hit, the stacking is so easy in this game that if you get that right and it does hit, you're automatically probably going to be in the money. So I do
thank
like
God you didn't try to bring in Kyle Pitts, because then I would have just, I don't know, walked out.
No. Yeah,
I've got too many zeros from Kyle Pitts to do Kyle Pitts ever again on anything.
Yeah, I'm already getting hurt enough in Kyle Pitts in my normal fantasy leagues. Yeah. I don't think I can let him hurt me in daily fantasy as well.
What about TJ Hawkinson, though? At 4,300 DraftKings, would he maybe be a good option? Because Atlanta does allow several tight ends to record 60-plus yards.
He's an option. I think I just haven't really made any lineups with him so far because, I mean, Bowers and Auden are so tempting.
Personally go Auden over Hawkinson?
Yeah, but if Bucky Irving's playing in that game, then Hawkinson's probably a good pivot. And you can do that the same day if you get the injury news and you can flip between the two. I do like Justin Jefferson. If I'm having anything in this game, I'm having Jefferson. He's the best receiver at home. He's the most talented receiver in the league. And this is a very poor Atlanta passing defense. They just don't get any pass rush. So if Darnold just gets to sit there in a clean pocket, he's going to find Jefferson more than not.
That's true. And we haven't seen Jefferson have a big week. I played him last week thinking that was going to be a good game. It turned out not to be, but maybe it is worth going back to him this week for sure.
Yeah, I don't think Jefferson's caught a touchdown since like week 7. So
Yeah.
he feels due to me.
Well, let's continue on to the Jets at Miami, where Miami is favored by 6 and the over-under is 45. I don't like this game.
This is another game I just don't like either. The Jets offense, I feel, should have an edge, but Aaron Rodgers is poison and killing everybody on the team. Devontae Adams is getting a lot of targets. He's tempting. He had 12 targets last week, but I don't think I can do it. I
Yeah,
also don't think this is the best matchup for the Dolphins to go crazy on points. But Sauce Gardner didn't practice on Wednesday, so
I do kind of feel like the Jets defense is giving up. I mean, teams have looked pretty good against them recently, and Miami really needs this win to just stay competitive and in the hunt for that last playoff spot. They are heavily motivated. Miami's look so off. I think the only one that's in play is Jonnu, but I mean, like we've been mentioning tight end every single game. I'm never taking Jonnu over Bowers if I'm paying up at tight end. So
yeah.
you do have Achane. I think Achane's kind of the forgotten running back in this slate of games. He's the second most expensive, right above Kamara. So, I mean, he could get lost in the shuffle, and he's always a threat, especially with his receiving work. So, not a bad option, and I don't think he'll get played a lot.
I don't think he will either. I think Achane's a good pivot off of Kamara because Kamara is projected to be the highest owned on the slate. And I like Achane equally as well as Kamara. Kamara is obvious, which we'll get to him when we get to that game. But anyone playing the Giants is kind of an obvious play.
Yeah, you're kind of trading a workload versus higher talent, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of running backs, let's continue on to the Chicago at San Francisco game, where San Francisco is favored by 3.5. That over-under is 44.5. And this is probably going to have a very well-known, not originally starter running back of Isaac Guerendo, who might have higher ownership with all the news of Christian McCaffrey and Mason being out.
I like Garindo. Right now, I mean, he's not even the highest owned running back. You were saying, it's Kamara. So I think if you get to play him at this cost, it's especially in cash. Like if you're playing a tournament, easy enough to get away from him. There's other options that you can switch to, but I think in cash you have to, partly because the field's probably going to go there a lot more, and so it's safer. But he does open up some other options, and just as a prospect, he hasn't really gotten much of an opportunity. He looked okay in his opportunity last week, but he was the number one athletic score for running backs coming out of the combine. I think his knocks as a runner or his vision and his cuts, but Shanahan does have great running schemes to get his guys in space. And if you have the number one athlete of this class in space, I think he just needs a player or two to make it worthwhile. And he's the only one left. So that's kind of my argument for him. That I think
So the argument against him is the Bears somehow shut down Jamar Gibbs and David Montgomery last week and kept them both out of the end zone. They can do it.
yes, but I mean, Jameer Gibbs fumbled on the 5. There were some weird things I felt like that happened in that game. They can. Chicago's not a bad defense, but I'm willing to take if he's getting all the workload, he's going to be able to break one or two of them and pay off his price.
So my worry in this game is I don't think Brock Purdy's 100%. And therefore I'm wondering if they have any passing game and if the Bears sniff out any of that they don't have a passing game because Purdy's hurt, then the running game goes away.
That they just shut him down completely?
They just shut him down. And they've got that motivational bounce from firing their coach and getting rid of him. I see the Bears winning this, and they may just dominate this game.
Yeah, I think the Bears are due for that kind of moral boost. They've been competitive in all these games, and San Francisco's kind of trending the opposite direction with all their injuries. they're just too banged up to really compete.
They are.
So-
Yeah, and I don't think we know the truth about Purdy.
Speaking of injuries, there are quite a bit of questionables on the Chicago offensive side. What do y'all think about Odunze for a inexpensive maybe or a cheaper wide receiver?
I don't mind him. I'd have to wait and see if Keenan Allen's going to be in there or not. But Odunze's seeing some targets, but I like Allen better.
I think Odunze would be probably my third. Keenan's been getting all the targets since that offensive coordinator change, and I think if he were to miss, then DJ Moore would probably pick up a lot of that slack. So
And
I'd be
if
Although
fine
he's
with
Logan's
either.
questionable too.
Yeah,
It's
both
true.
are questionable.
If he's the
Like
only
the
one
whole
there,
offense is
yeah.
questionable.
Let's continue on to Seattle at Arizona, where Arizona's favored by 2.5. Over under is 44. This is another game causing some contention between the three of us, where the Seahawks and Arizona just played a couple weeks ago, and the Seahawks only won 16-6. What do y'all think here?
Not my favorite game. Parts of it are interesting. I don't think this ends up the stinker game that we saw a couple weeks ago at 16-6. And Trey McBride in that game did rack up 28 fantasy points without a receiving or a rushing touchdown. So that's kind of a great day for him. He could definitely do it again. And it's in a dome. We don't have to worry about the rain this go around. Marvin Harrison could have a big game. There's a lot of could haves in this, but I feel like I'm just maybe wishful thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just gonna depend on the recent history here. These teams know each other pretty well, divisional opponents, and Arizona's defense has been steadily improving throughout the season. We thought they would be kind of a bottom half defense, but they've looked pretty good recently. So I think I'm kind of leaning that Arizona does take it, but it does hit the under. And I think if this team gets a lead, they want to just hammer the way with James Conner. I don't think James Conner will probably be efficient enough to have a great game, but I think that would just make the game end pretty quickly.
Let's continue on to Cleveland at Pittsburgh, where Pittsburgh is favored by 6.5. Over under is 43.5. I'm really surprised by that. Pittsburgh being favored by 6.5, since these two teams just played 2 weeks ago and Cleveland won. I know it was in a snow globe, or it was like the snowstorm game, but 6.5 is still
Yeah.
a big spread.
Well, you
It is.
can just go watch the George Pickens interviews and find out how he feels about the Cleveland Browns and that they weren't really any good and they got lucky and won the snow globe event.
Yeah, I feel like these teams hate each other. I have not watched the Hard Knocks episode, but I'm kind of interested to see this matchup and see the footage from this game. I don't think this will be the game where Jameis Winston's prayers for not throwing pick sixes gets answered. I think Pittsburgh's defense is a pretty good pay up option if you have some extra cash when you're getting to the end of your lineup. But I think you can go Judy. I would say the Broncos are one of the best defenses, and if he was able to do that on Monday night, then there's no reason he couldn't do it against the Steelers. I think they'll probably key into him a little bit more, but he's still not too expensive at 5,700.
Yeah, the only reason that the Browns in their previous matchup only let Jameis Winston throw 27 times was they were in the game. So we saw against the Broncos on Monday night when they were behind, they let him throw 58 times for 497 yards. Yeah, he was getting pick sixes, but we don't get dinged minus 6 points when he throws a pick six. We only lose a point. So he is definitely worth a shot. They're going to be behind. They're going to be throwing, I would think. Kind of what we expected the first go around in the snow globe.
I think we haven't really talked much about the Pittsburgh side of things. I think Najee will be heavily involved. I mean, Pickens is always a decision, but if Cleveland is throwing those those interceptions, and especially the pick sixes, because then they're just immediately back on the field, and we just never get to see the Pittsburgh offense. I think that's kind of why I've been drawn away from them and not really viewing them as options. Like, I just don't think they're going to have too much of a time of possession, and they'll probably win the game.
Well, let's continue on to some of our lowest scoring games. New Orleans at the New York Giants, where New Orleans is favored by 5 and the over-under is 40.5. I don't know if there's too many options here. Kamara?
The big chalk. They're projecting him at 30% ownership, and at 8K, he needs to be over 32 fantasy points to pay off in a tournament. He had 30 in week 9 and 47 in week 2, so it's obvious he can do it. I just don't know that much happens in this game, that they're just bad teams playing together.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of reaching the point of the season where these teams aren't playing for anything except for draft capital. And we already saw the Giants bench their quarterback to make sure he didn't get injured and probably set themselves up well for the draft. So neither of these teams are too motivated. And the Saints are just so hurt. I think if you wanted to get away from Kamara, Scaling's still an option. He's at a touchdown 3 straight. He's at 4.6 as a punt play. Kamara's going to get all the work, but I think the Giants are just going to stack the box and hopefully take some pride at home to stop the run. I do want to mention Tyrone Tracy. We do like home running backs, and he has shown some flashes through his rookie season, and this is a bad Saints rushing defense as well. So I think he could break away a couple. He's sitting there at 5.8, so I think he'll get very overlooked in that middle range.
He definitely will, because usually you want your home running back to actually be favored in the matchup, and he's not.
True, but I'm not too intimidated by the 4-8 Saints.
Well, I was going to say, actually, I for defenses, could this be a good option at 2,900?
Do we know who the starter is for the Giants?
Yeah, it's Drew Lock.
Okay. They did announce that it was. Yeah, the Saints defense, I think I tend to lean towards home defenses, but either side would work well in this game. I don't think it's going to be a higher scoring game.
Well, let's continue on to Jacksonville at Tennessee. Tennessee's favored at 3. Tennessee's favored by 3.5, and the over/under is 39.5. Rain is likely at this game.
I can just cross off all of Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Parts of Tennessee are intriguing, but none of Jacksonville.
I agree. And this game is a little surprising. I think the Vegas spread of Tennessee only being favored -3.5 against a banged up team that's already bad to begin with. That kind of surprised me at home. But I think the Tennessee players are actually getting decent amount of roster percentage. I think Will Levis was actually showing up as the number 1 quarterback, which shocked me because he just has not been a very good fantasy option at all. This Jacksonville passing defense does like to play a lot of man. I do think Ridley will have some success. And then I like Pollard just as a home favorite running back that's going to get a good amount of workload against a bad rushing defense. He kind of checks all the boxes.
Would this be another defense we should look at their cost? Tennessee, not Jacksonville.
You could. I don't think
Jacksonville's playing a backup quarterback because Trevor Lawrence is out for the year.
Yes. I don't think they'll let Mac Jones kind of take over to have enough of a leash to have enough interceptions and sacks for the Tennessee defense. That's kind of my only worry. I think they are happy enough to run the ball and lose by 7 and go on to next week.
So one more that we'll talk really, really briefly about is the Chargers at Kansas City, where Kansas City's favored by 4, and the over-under is 42.5. This is the Sunday night game, so this is only going to be on your FanDuel main slate. Quinten, I think you have a couple of thoughts here specifically.
Yeah, really, it just comes down to the lat injury. If he's playing, he'll probably be a great option. If he's not, he opens up Disley as a cheap punt option on FanDuel. Other than that, defenses are in play, and that's kind of about it.
Well, that wraps us up for all the games. Let's build a lineup, a DraftKings lineup.
Let's see where we can go. So we both really liked the Vegas and Tampa game, and then I kind of am on one side of the Philadelphia game, at least the Philadelphia side. And we've kind of talked previously about this, and I haven't been on like the Hurts so much, but I'll tell you what, as long as I get Saquon Barkley in my lineup, you all can pick the rest of them.
I kind of like the pairing of Garindo and Barkley.
All right. Like I said, as long as I get Barkley. Are you good with this, Lauren? Garindo and Barkley?
Yep.
I feel we're chalky with Garindo. I will say that, but I'm going to do it.
We are.
And like I said, if you want to put in Hurts, I'm going to let you put in Hurts now.
No, I think the one way that we can kind of get different, because I do think these running backs are going to be chalky, or the combination of Barkley, Garindo, and Kamara are going to show up with so much roster percentage. So we can look for kind of pump plays with wide receiver to make sure we're different somehow. But with a larger game slate, we don't really need to be as worried about getting different as the Thanksgiving slate, for example, but some we'll keep in mind later on.
Sure. Do we want to pick quarterback?
Yeah.
Do we want
Do
to
we
do
want to
that?
go with the AOC or Mayfield? I think I'd be more comfortable with Mayfield if I knew Irving was out.
Well, let's go with
But
what we know today.
sounds good.
And
So we're going to do
Irving's not out.
AOC.
AOC.
The one
We have a
week where we're
few-
going to pick a Vegas stack, huh?
Yeah, we may come back and regret this, but we'll see.
So
Obviously, we've got to go with both of them, right?
yeah.
So Myers and Brock Bowers, if we're going to do this. Or you
I
want to
agree.
spread it out with Kate Otten?
No, I think we just have to go to Bowers. There's no way that AOC has a good game and Bowers doesn't.
Is this one of those weird weeks where we can play 2 tight ends?
I think so.
Can we play Trey McBride? Can we play Kate Otten? Can we save money by 2 tight ends, which we all know you never do?
It might be. I am interested in those pay up wide receiver options. So we have a good amount of savings with those cheap stack of AOC, Myers, and Bowers. Overall, for the three of them, have a pretty cheap average price.
We do, except then we got Barkley, and we're already sitting down at 46.75 average remaining. So who do you want to pay up for at wide receiver?
Jefferson is kind of the name that stands out of that list. I think also with this game stack, Mike Evans does make sense. That this game's competitive, it's a shootout. No one can cover Evans. He gets there.
So we can't pay for Evans and Jefferson.
I would agree. Let's say with Evans right now, and then kind of come back to our last couple, or our last wide receiver and flex spot.
Okay, I think I kind of like Jefferson more, but
I kind of just want a Buccaneer in that game because I don't think the Raiders are going to steamroll them.
I don't either. I think that's where you can go Kate Otten.
With Otten?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and the
what I
2
was
tight
thinking.
end, which is super different.
It will be different. Yeah.
With Mike Evans in there, assume it's like super competitive. I don't feel like I need a pass catcher on the Bucs side, but
Or I do like White if we want to have him in our flex.
I could do White. Lauren? White?
I like Otten more than White personally, but sure.
Let's go on then.
I think White's cheaper. And then you want to pay up for Jefferson?
Yeah, I'm good with Jefferson.
Let me see how much Otten is. No, he's
4,400.
4,400. All right, what do we got? Oh, we need to save some money. We're down at 2,800 a player.
All right, so let's swap Auden in there. We did bring up some pump plays, so I think we'll still be able to find a cheap enough wide receiver that we're comfortable with.
Okay, so let's pick a defense. We need something cheap. Bears
The
defense?
cheapest we're comfortable with. I'm good with the Bears. I think my second choice would be the Giants.
Giants. I like the Bears. We save a couple hundred more because now we only have 4,100 for that remaining wide receiver.
So what is that? What are the player pool around that mark? We brought up Mac Hollins. There's also
I think that's what we're really going to be looking at.
There's not a lot down here.
Because there's Mac Hollins.
You could go McMillan on Tampa Bay. I mean, if we're all in on that game, you could go McMillan. If we went McMillan, can we get back to White? No, we can't. I don't love doing 2 tight ends. It's one of the odd games I think it works in. A very unusual situation.
I agree. We did see it, luckily, in the Tampa Bay game earlier, where we had a Kyle Pitts go off and Kate Otten went off in the same game, but that was National Tight End Day, so I don't know if it'll carry over.
It feels like this is National Tight End Weekend again. We'll
the
see.
Option I think
But
I
I've
like
got
is probably Hollins after this.
Mac Hollins for the Bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the only one that's really popping out of there that I can see because I like Naylor, but I don't want to do him with Jefferson. So
There's some other shots with Calvin Austin. I mean, he's a deep threat for Pittsburgh.
Isn't he the one that took the big shot and has a concussion?
Yeah.
Does he? There's also
Yeah.
Mike Williams if he's out. But I think Hollins is probably the one I trust the most.
All right, let's go Hollins. This is definitely a tournament lineup. I'm going to tell you that. This is a lottery ticket that this is the game script, that this goes kind of crazy. and that we see the tight ends go wild.
Just in
Yeah.
the Tampa Bay Vegas game.
I do think
Yeah.
you're going to see some variations of those that have the like very chalky running backs. And we were talking that Will Levis was the most owned quarterback projecting, and him and Ridley will probably be some other cheap stacks that you'll see. But it's going to be weird to get completely different. I don't think fading the top end running backs is going to be successful. So I think you're going to see some weird tournament lineups this week.
Yeah, I agree. And I have a lot of I have wide receivers that I like Jerry Judy and some different ones in here. But I don't feel like you can pay for anybody if you're going after those running backs.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to be in trouble if you don't have them.
I agree.
Which is also a good way to, if you're worried about some of these riskier options and want to just have some fun, we have our free contest, and free contests in general are a great way to get to still have fun and take some of these even really larger risk, I think. You feel safer in making some of these really out there predictions, but the link for that free contest is in the description, so make sure to click it and join us this week. We will have a prize pack for the winner. Happy football watching, everyone.